Hey again, this is Dan, back with another Book of the Week review. This week we're reviewing the title Click by Ori and Ram Brafman, which is a book that was written in 2010 and is all about the idea of forming relationships with people and that feeling that we get when we click with someone instantly. Now, most of us have felt this kind of emotion in the past where you meet someone and within a couple of minutes you're talking very, intimately, you're starting to get into really good rapport with someone. It might be good humor, it might be an interest, something that's really bonding you together. And this book tries to explore that concept and how it is actually created between two people and how a relationship that comes from clicking very quickly tends to become a long-lasting relationship in a lot of situations. Now, Ori and Ram have spent quite a few years in their respective fields as a business consultant and as a psychologist researching this and looking into the background of relationships and how it all works. So there's some really good ideas in this book, and I wanted to share just a couple of the main themes to help you to click with people more and to understand what it is that causes this kind of dynamic in your life. Now, there are 5 key factors or techniques that you can use to build relationships with people and to make that click factor happen very quickly. So the 5 things are vulnerability, proximity, resonance, similarity, and frame. Now, when you hear these words, they may not be what you're expecting. You might have been expecting something like listening or empathy or something like that, or commonality. But it's interesting when you get into these ideas how much it's true that they do impact the way you feel about someone. So I'm going to take you through each of them in a little bit of detail and give you some ideas that'll get you thinking. So the first one is vulnerability. Now, when you think of being vulnerable, it's probably not something that you would link to having a good relationship. And what's interesting is in this book they talk about the idea that human beings actually train themselves as they go into adulthood to be less vulnerable, to display being strong and being confident and being self-assured. And the act of being vulnerable is something that we only really give out to people who we know very, very well and we feel very comfortable with. And what they talk about is the idea that if you actually show some vulnerability, you show the fact that you might be concerned or that you might have a weakness or that you might have, a chip in your armor, that actually makes people feel more comfortable with you and move to a more intimate level quicker. So it's a very counterintuitive way of actually approaching a situation. Now, this doesn't mean that you necessarily go around complaining and being a bit of a wimp and a sook, but it does mean that you can actually let people in a little bit more, give up a little bit more of your honest person and be a bit more vulnerable with people early on to actually let them feel like they can click with you. It's a great technique. The next one is proximity. Now, this one's another counterintuitive one where it talks about people who tend to live near each other tend to bond with each other quicker. Now, if you think about it, if you've ever been to college and you've had a roommate, or if you've been on a traveling basketball team or something like that, or you've had to do something where you've had to work in close proximity with people, live with them, work with them for a while, you find that you've quite bonded with them after a certain period of time. Purely because there's small little conversations and little experiences that you share that you wouldn't share if you weren't spending so much time together. And this is why, neighborhood friends or brothers and sisters, family members, people who we share a lot of our life with at early stages can tend to have deep relationships with us over the long term because we've had so many small experiences that we've shared together, we've been through on the journey together. So proximity is a great one to actually help you to build relationship with people. If you're close to someone, or you can set up a situation where you can work in close proximity on a team or something like that, you'll find that it actually helps the team to bond. So interesting idea. The next one is resonance. Now, the word resonance might sound a bit strange, and what I think they're talking about here is the idea of engagement, of actually being in the flow, of feeling like you're energized and you're doing something great in life. Now, we've all had that experience. It might be in our work, it might be in a hobby, it might be when we're around other people. We have that sense of flow, that sense of time passing without us knowing, and we're really in the moment. That's what resonance is, and they're saying that if we can experience that type of emotion with other people, whether we're working on a project or whether we're experiencing some sort of event together, like maybe a ball game or something like that, something where we're actually having a peak experience together, where we're resonating at a higher level, it will bond us as people very quickly. The next one is similarity, and this one's probably the most obvious because we tend to like people who are like us. But what's interesting is we actually give people who are like us, or we think like the same things as us, a little bit more leeway, a little bit more benefit of the doubt. We tend to respect them a little bit more and trust them a little bit more. So you'll find that if you can find some similarity with someone quickly, you'll find that that person will tend to lower their guard a little bit. Same as vulnerability, it's one of those ones that if you use it in the right way, it will actually make people bond with you quicker. So similarity is a great one to have up your sleeve and to use whenever you can in a situation where you're communicating with someone new. And the final factor is what they call a frame. Now, a frame is basically an environment or a situation, something that surrounds the relationship. So it might be a certain event that you're at, it might be a certain project that you were working on, it might be a certain day that you were together, something that created a unique experience and environment for the two people to connect in. Now, you find this very often if you go traveling somewhere, if you're on a plane or something like that, and you're stuck in a seat for a long time, you can actually connect with the person sitting next to you quite well because your whole situation is framed for a certain period. And you'll find it actually creates kind of a bond and a sense of kind of camaraderie between the two of you because you're stuck in that situation and you're using the frame to actually build trust and connection with that person. Again, a little bit counterintuitive, something you probably wouldn't recognize until you notice it, but you'll notice that if you've ever traveled with someone or you've ever been stuck in a situation with someone for a certain amount of time and there was a frame around it and it lasted a certain period, that actually helped to bond the two of you. So that's another great one to use and to notice in your relationships. The final part of this book talks about people who are naturals. Now, some people, as you know, tend to have just a natural affinity for meeting people, bonding with them, building relationships and connecting. And in the book they try to spend a little bit of time really working with people who have this natural ability and trying to understand what it is that they do differently to most people that enables them to bond well. It's an interesting part of the book. And the most important thing that I took away from this was the idea that people who are naturally good at communicating with others tend to be what they call high self-monitoring people. They tend to actually monitor their own behavior and observe how others are receiving their communication, and they adapt and evolve their communication style to suit the environment. So for instance, if they're around someone who's quite high energy and excited, they tend to become more high energy and excited. If they're around someone who's very serious and is in a situation which is very tense, they tend to become more serious and they focus on the situation at hand and they try and help the person as much as they can. All these little things that they do are very under the surface, but they're monitoring their behavior at all times and they're adapting. Now you'll notice that people like politicians or very highly skilled business negotiators, people like that do this very well as well. And that's the reason that they tend to get into these positions, is because people, when they're one-to-one with them, feel like they're connecting very quickly. You may not see it when you're looking at them on a television screen or something like that, but in the environment with the person they can connect very quickly. And there's a lot of examples of people like Bill Clinton, for instance, who could do this very well. He could adapt his relationship with someone very quickly to monitor their behavior and actually monitor his own and be able to match the person very well and feel like he was comfortable with them on a one-to-one level. So there's some great examples in this book of specific people, not just politicians and business people, but everyday people as well, who are high self-monitors, who are able to use this technique very well. In conclusion, this book is a great read. It's very simple. It's not a lot of complex ideas or techniques. It's just some ideas to get you thinking, probably more noticing what's happening in your day-to-day relationships. And if you've ever had that situation where you've clicked with someone, maybe your spouse or a good friend or something like that in the past, now you can maybe think about what was it that actually drove that relationship. Was it vulnerability? Was it proximity? Was it resonance? Was it similarity? Or was it the frame of the situation? Something in there actually made you feel much more connected to that person very quickly. And while we don't want to spoil the magic, we want to actually just experience the relationship as it is, it's also good to think about it because you can use those same techniques with other people when you're getting to know them. So overall, this book, Click, is well worth a read. I recommend it. If you're a person who's good at communicating with people, it's only going to enhance that. If you're someone who wants to learn more, it's a great way to get started. So check it out. It's available out there now, and I'll talk to you again soon.